was a very small young gentleman, I drew sea monsters every day of the week. Monsters with umbrellas or without. Monsters drinking blood through straws, and whole monster families with lots of little monster pussies. When one day I drew a terrible monster funeral, all covered in parsley sauce, an aunt suggested that I should be psychoanalyzed by a psychoanalyst. So they took me along to see one, and I well remember his cotton wool beard and Benedictine nose full of long black hairs. After a very short interview, he said I could now go home. His face turned quite green. What a pity it was. I'm not quite sure what became of him afterwards, but I went on drawing monsters. When I was 8 years old, the Bible fascinated me in every way. I illustrated the whole of it during my mathematics lesson. Oddly enough, they allowed me to do this after a meeting of the school staff. The illustrations, over 400 of them, were shown in the art room, and immediately 2 parents removed their boys from the school. I failed my matriculation miserably. My answers seemed to take little room, and I found it difficult to resist an opportunity of filling those dreadful empty spaces with sausages playing bassoons, gooseberries having their hair cut, and offensive caricatures of my examiners as I imagined them to be. In due course it was decided that I was to become an artist, and that I was to attend art school. But even here I found myself lost. The principal was furious at my caricature of him, with which I presented him at the end of term. It was a good one, too. Now and then I was able to caricature the models who used to sit so smugly in front of their electric fires while the rest of us had to sit in the cold. Of course, you know, models are very sensitive people, which I didn't know at the time. I've never been able to discover why they're so sensitive. Maybe because they spend most of the day without their clothes. The only encouragement I got was from a very pink-looking master. He was a real artist, and he could draw a horse with his eyes all plastered up with sticky plaster. He said I was wasting my time here, and he thought he knew the right place for me to go to. I took his advice. All the same, when told to draw a chair or a table, it was well nigh impossible for me to keep the thing inanimate. When I'd finished it, there it stood, with an expression. It looked as though it was just about to answer the telephone or eat a ham sandwich. On top of the chair sat a couple of jam tarts playing poker. I had almost nothing to do with them. There they were, as if they'd dropped out of a tree. It happened then, and it happens now. I drew and drew, accepting with resignation that my tables and beds would be wearing felt boots at the end of the day. It didn't really matter very much. My teachers forgave me, provided I worked, and that I did. When I left art school, I managed to get a teaching job at a small school in the country, and I tried to pass on to the boys what I'd learnt myself. I learned a lot from the boys. They were some of the best teachers I have ever had. And what a nice bunch they were, with the exception of 2 who let loose a young calf in the art room. While I was still teaching, I had been doing some cartoons for the local newspaper. And then one day I had a very tempting offer from a London evening paper. Now, what happened in Fleet Street? I found after a time that I hadn't got the experience and the maturity of a professional cartoonist. It was most difficult to turn out a drawing every day, and in the end I gave it up, or rather they gave me up. I went on studying for a time and got a job as assistant art man on a magazine. At last I was beginning to sell drawings, and I could see my little ladies and gentlemen printed. I used to get very excited when this happened. I would watch out for people who looked at them in the underground, on buses, in balloons, wherever I happened to be at the time. I applauded loudly to myself on the rare occasions when an enlightened member of the public dwelt on my work, and once I screamed horribly when an elderly woman missed my page, and at the next station she left hurriedly for another compartment. Ah, what a wonderful experience it is to see one's work in print for the first time. It was like cutting off one's nose or moustache and mounting it on a little board for everyone to see. Each drawing said, "Hello, my dear fellow," or "What's the time, cock?" They're part of oneself like a big toe. To my great surprise and delight, commissions began to come in, and at last I was able to call myself a freelance artist, though freelance is, I think, a very stupid word indeed. I'm often asked, how do you get your ideas, and how fortunate you are to be drawing those funny things all day long. What fun it must be. Ha ha! How stupid some people are. There's nothing more sordid, nothing more dreadful than having to do funny drawings all day long. I think I'm speaking for most of my colleagues when I say that cartooning is one long nightmare from beginning to end, though I don't suppose I'd ever choose to do anything else. You know, my wife tells me that I sit at my drawing board making a very horrid face while I try to think of something funny. Those who are familiar with the things I do have a rather curious idea in common. They always take me for a very old man. I cannot think why. Not long ago, a lady in South Acton wrote me a letter saying she had been following caricature in England for the past 70 years, and she couldn't make out why she had noticed my work only in the past 5 years. I replied in an old and shaky hand, saying that I changed my style a good bit lately to keep up with the times, and that all my earlier work was in the storeroom of the National Gallery. One more thing. My little chaps may be ugly and sometimes quite vicious-looking, but on the whole they're amiable folk with Christmas puddings inside them. At least that's what I like to think they are. They put up with one another, and with me, with exemplary resignation. None of them ever bit me or lunged at me with an open sardine tin, and I would never allow that sort of behavior to go on. If there are any signs of a riff-raff, we will call a policeman, and he will come riding along on a llama, sucking a monstrous straw. The whole incident would not amount to much. So even when I draw a really horrible old monster, I greet his arrival with affection and tolerance. I give him a cup of tea, or a basin full of blood, or a saucer of cement to drink before he sits down to pose. Ah, indeed, there's one sitting outside right at this moment waiting to be drawn, if he's polite, and I sincerely hope he will be. He will take off his head and he will say, "Merry Christmas."